Good evening, Ma. Please confirm. Am I audible? I'm sharing the screen now. Please note. And yes, let me not take much time in telling the importance of Indian culture module. You guys all already know that because most of you are also the students who have attended the previous year's session. And yes, this is one such topic which is important, not only for your prelims examination, but also in your mains examination. And you would have seen the kind of questions they have asked in the mains 2020, isn't it? So he's expecting us to think beyond NCRTs or regular textbooks and expecting us to be a little more focused on current events and current affairs and try to pick threads from current events and current threads and try to read more from newspapers articles which are related to culture and culture related events. So that's a very important thing. And also learn to intelligently apply all the knowledge which you are learning through Indian culture also in other aspects, like say while writing your essays or while writing your mains answers, especially the ones in ethics. Definitely those concepts which you learn in culture will come in handy, will help in enriching the concepts. And as I've already shared the document with you, the previous year's document, that's quite exhaustive. Make some time. If you guys have already gone through it, it's very fine. But if you guys have not gone through, make it a point to take some time and revise the document as thoroughly as possible. But what I am trying to say is, in the present module, definitely I know the document which was discussed previously, that's a little more colorful and exciting because there are more images. Here, like as I've also thought, I'll spend 1.5 hours to 2 hours time each on Buddhism and Jainism. I know it will be a little boring. Let me tell it in little advance. But yes, the kind of questions they're asking from Jainism and Buddhism definitely warrants us to go a little deeper and study those concepts. So be patient. Try to not skip the sessions at any cost. Try to carefully note down what all we are discussing. And yes, that is how. And these topics like Jainism, Buddhism, it's not that you guys will not understand if you read on your own. You will understand even if you read on your own. But make this module to make certain dynamic memories, and as you're taking down notes, seeing those images or hearing those narratives which are connected to it, so that's how you try to make dynamic memory, and that's how you tend to remember better the concepts which we are learning through class. Okay, so on this note, let me begin the session. So this is the first topic, which is also in current affairs. So Gujarat was the milk capital of India even 4,000 years ago. See, it is meant to say that it's not just that Gujarat is a leading milk producer in the contemporary times. Even before contemporary times, Gujarat used to be leading milk producer is the intent behind this. The reason being, recently it has been found that a place called Kotada Badli, a place called Kotada Badli. Try to remember this name. Let me write it again for you so that you will remember it better. If it asked in the exam, this place called Kotada Badli. This is a place in Gujarat where evidences have been noted out of dairying industry. That too, there are also evidences of dairying industry on a commercial scale, not just livestock rearing at individual level or household level, but a dairying industry of commercial scale was identified in archaeological evidences at a place called as Kotada Badli in Gujarat. And yes, as you guys must be already aware, Harappan civilization, Indus Valley civilization is noted for its livestock rearing. You can see it on many seals of those period. Look at this bull, Jebu bull seal, very popular, right? It's found at many places like Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, in all these places, we have evidences of this Cebu bull. Okay, so yes, and another interesting observation which has come out of this finding of Kotada Badali is, see, we often think or we often consider that Harappan site, or Harappan civilization or Indus Valley civilization is predominantly or predominated by urban civilization and characterized by lesser presence of villages or lesser presence of rural economy, lesser presence of village life or lesser presence of rural economy. Often Harappan civilization is glorified, or often Harappan civilization is identified with urban civilization. But this particular Kotada Badli is an example to prove that Harappan civilization need not be or may not be exclusively an urban dominated civilization. There also existed a possibility of existence of a vibrant rural economy in Indus Valley civilization, and there also are evidences to suggest this healthy exchange or healthy trade between the urban areas and rural areas of Indus Valley civilization. So this Kotada Badli opens up new thinking, opens up new evidences of existence of rural economy, which also has interlinkages with urban economy during Harappan age, during Indus Valley civilization. Okay, ma? So two important things we have learned. One, the site Kotada Badli in Gujarat, and other one, the Zebu bull seals, which are predominantly found all over in Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. And another aspect is this agrarian economy and dawn of animal and farm-centric village life. Okay, so these are certain ideas which can be important, So this actually is that place called as Kotada Badli of Gujarat. Can you guys quickly recollect and tell me other important Indus Valley civilization sites in the state of Gujarat? In the state of Gujarat, anything you can quickly recollect? Okay. Okay, good. Good. So Lothal is popular for its okay, dockyard. Anything else? Just a dockyard. It's a port city. Yes, good. It's a port city. Why it has become a port city? Is it an industrial port city or just a port city? Yeah, you have to be aware. The reason why it has become an industrial port city is because which industry has predominated? Bead making industry has predominated Lothal. As bead making industry has predominated Lothal, there existed a port connectivity between, you must be aware, Indus Valley civilization established trade with Mesopotamian civilization, especially the southern Mesopotamian Sumerian civilization, isn't it? Yes. So this actually is the site of Kotada Badli. Let's try to just see some of the important sites of Gujarat. You guys may be aware, but use it to revise once. Dholavira, Surkotoda, and Lothal. UPSC generally it plays by giving you not simply popular ones. Say it will club in such a way that it will give you 2-3 popular names and it will deliberately give you one not so popular name. This is when we come up saying that I could identify 2 options, but I could not identify or I could not rule out third option. So just to avoid such a confusion or such a lack of clarity, generally what is suggested, try to learn state-wise. If not, you mug up, or if you not remember all the names, at least try to identify them. So definitely, see, you must be aware, most often the questions are such that whenever any factual based questions are identified, are asked in exam, you guys will accurately identify almost 2-3 points, but one thing you will be not sure, you will not be comfortable. So such a problem arises because when we are reading itself, we all have this familiarity bias. We tend to remember better what we already know, and we tend to ignore things which we don't know, thinking them that they are not important. That's not correct. So especially that's more relevant when it comes to topics like culture or Indian history. I've observed students, so whenever they're reading topics which are familiar or popular, like say non-cooperation, civil disobedience, whatever, quit India, they try to remember every trivia, minutest possible of details. Anything beyond that, if it comes, even if it's a simple and important thing, we tend to not confidently approach such a topic. So avoid this familiarity bias. Don't try to learn things which you already know much deeper. That also is important. At the same time, you also should move slightly out of that comfort zone and try to remember or understand those concepts which may not have been taught in your class, or which may not have been highlighted, but which may be having some significance, that discretion should have. Okay, go through this thing once again. In tomorrow's session also, once again, I'll try to come up the discussion. I'll try to quickly ask you the state-wise distribution of Indus Valley civilization. Your responsibility for tomorrow's class, try to identify various Indus Valley sites according to the states, at least Indian states, and also those sites which are not located in India but are important. And just identify what these cultures are which are located. This also I'll try to mention into tomorrow's class. What are these cultures? How are they related to Indus Valley civilization? Because they have asked enough number of questions on Indus Valley civilization. So now there is a possibility that UPSC may be interested in any contemporary rural cultures which also belong to Chalcolithic phase and which also are in Indus Valley civilization. Of course, for students of anthropology, this topic may be very easy. But yes, if they can ask a question on Mesolithic paintings, or if they can ask a question on, minutest details related to some Pala type numismatics, an important topic like, rural Chalcolithic cultures contemporary to Indus Valley or post Indus Valley, can definitely be a possible question and an important topic. And don't think that it's not discussed in your NCERT. The topic also has been discussed in your NCERTs. So for tomorrow's class, just prepare briefly on this. I'll also try to initiate the discussion again in tomorrow's session. So the reason why the topic or the discussion on Lothal has come up is, so government is planning to establish Maritime Museum in Lothal. Maritime Museum in Lothal. Okay, it's in Harappan site in Gujarat. It's also an independent research center of underwater archaeology for reconstruction of maritime history, archaeology of boat building and material trade. It will have on display salvaged material from shipwreck sites in Indian Ocean water. It's being set up with technical help from Portuguese Maritime Affairs Museum. So, you will be shocked to know that a conservative estimate says that in the Indian Ocean alone, there are 10 to 15 lakh ship wreckages now. There are 10 to 15 lakh ship wreckages, means so many ships or smaller sized boats, catamarans, whatever you call it, they have sunk in the ocean bottom. They are there on the ocean bottom. It's not that these ships which are located on the ocean bottom, they may be having a lot of wealth, but yes, by developing interest in underwater archaeology, or by developing interest in trying to understand the the kind of boat building material used, the kind of items traded, we can get to know better details about the history of past eras. And this can also help us in, of course, trying to identify India's maritime past maritime trade routes, and the goods which might have traded, any remnants which were still left under the boat wreckages. So all such information could be available. That was the intent with which government is planning to start a maritime museum at a place called Lothal in Gujarat. Place called Lothal in Gujarat, right? Yeah, nothing conceptual as till now. What we have discussed, all these are simple facts. So yes, be aware of it. The names, especially Kotadapatli or Lothal, or place like Dholavira, Surkotoda, and what you are seeing here is, must have already understood, This is one, diagrammatic illustration of port city of Lothal. In the initial days, there were, lack of agreement among various archaeologists and historians to identify if Lothal was really a port or not. Now, evidences exist beyond doubt by certain, archaeological evidences. It has been confirmed that undoubtedly Lothal is a port. Lothal is a port, and it also has an inland navigation channel or inland water channel, and that's how. And this was thought to be the so-called port of Lothal. Yes. This point, which I'm already mentioning, that is bead maker's skill, just try to quickly go through it so that you will not forget. It's not that difficult to understand. Bead making is a major industry of Lothal. That's the reason it has become an industrial capital. So it has become an industrial city. Bead making and lapidaries working in nearby factory used this circular kiln to heat semi-precious stones before removing the cortex and to bake finished beads for deepening. This is actually the kiln, brick kiln used in bead making. So this technique is still followed by bead makers of the present time, Gulf of Cambia also. So Lothal exported a variety of stone paste ivory and shell to Bahrain and Sumerian cities. The technique of etching was well known here. So yes, after this session, you also should be aware that Lothal is not just a port city, but also an industrial port city. And Lothal also is popular for bead making industry. So in this context, one more topic which is often neglected, or one more topic which is often not taken seriously by aspirants, is trying to study about ancient civilizations, all these things. So definitely UPSC will be actively identifying which areas students often ignore or underemphasize before going to class, because these are the areas which we feel little discomfort because the textbooks also writes them in a confusing way. Though I'll not go into detailed discussion on this topic, I'll just touch this and leave. If time permits, in tomorrow or day after tomorrow session, I'll try to bring more these points into discussion. But at least by the end of this module, you guys should get this sense of, say, even there is a possible question, if not in detailed manner, on, say, contemporary popular civilizations, say Indus Valley civilization. We often say that Indus Valley civilization, there are certain contemporaries. At least we should be aware of the names of those civilizations with confidence, and the sites and the timeline and the tentative timelines of these civilizations. Make it a point now. There will be hardly 4 or 5 such important things. If you write down all them in 1 page or 2 pages, it will not come more than that, because it's and nothing more conceptual. It's largely about certain facts, and write down all such facts at one place. It will be easy for you to revise. So one example which we are discussing, or I'm about to discuss now, is the Sumerian civilization. Yeah, any guess where does this Sumerian civilization exist? As some of you guys have already told, Sumerian civilization is predominantly in especially the southern Mesopotamia. Especially the southern Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is located in between which rivers? Mesopotamia is located between which rivers? Very good. Between only one river? Yeah. Euphrates and Tigris. Euphrates and Tigris rivers. Let's see this quickly. So earliest known civilization in the historical region of southern Mesopotamia is this Sumerian civilization. And observe this. It belongs to Chalcolithic and early Bronze Ages between 6th and 5th millennium BC. 6th and 5th millennium BC. So in those, of course, in India, Chalcolithic age starts little later. Observe very carefully, because in India, often we call Indus Valley civilization as Chalcolithic age. Chalcolithic age. Indus Valley civilization can be, or significant part of the Indus Valley civilization in the Chalcolithic age. Indian Indus Valley civilization, Chalcolithic age comes little later. You can also observe the contemporaries of Sumerian civilization, Egyptian civilization, Nottichico civilization, Minoan civilization. Try to identify after the session, where is this Minoan civilization? Are there any are there any important rivers which have led to prosperity of this civilization? Where is this Nottichico civilization? What is the reason for the popularity of this Nottichico civilization? And another important things, whenever you are reading these type of civilizations kind of topics, another thing which should be clear about is that you should be aware of important cities. Should be aware of important cities, at least 2-3 important cities, and any evidences of proto writing or any evidences of first agriculture, any evidences of cultural aspects, such things, if you come across, you must be in a position to identify and remember. And of course, rivers, or which type of geographical location favored the emergence and development of the civilization. In the case of Sumerian civilization, you can see it is Euphrates and Tigris. So yes, they have grown grain and other crops. So only because of the surplus, it has become possible for them to develop urban settlements. I think these aspects you would have already read in your Neolithic civilization, right? So only with the onset of agriculture and with the availability of surplus food, it has become possible for people to develop various aspects, whether it is cultural aspects, whether it is political institutions, whether it is emergence of more sophisticated social institutions, whether it is emergence of economic institutions. All emergence and origin of these social institutions or socio-cultural institutions, economic institutions, political institutions can be traced back to Neolithic age, as Chalcolithic age comes later. After Neolithic age, definitely there is more advancement in all this economic institution, political institution, or socio-cultural institution during Chalcolithic age. But we can more confidently say that evolution of cities also can be traced. Evolution of cities can be traced to the Chalcolithic age, and evolution of bigger cities can be traced to Iron Age. And coming back to this Sumerian civilization, proto-writing dates back to this age. So these are the important cities, Uruk and Zemdath Nazar. Try to remember these two names. There are other names also, but often these two names are heard. You can see it here. This is the Tigris River. This is the Euphrates River. And so that is the reason this is a civilization which has developed on the banks of these two rivers. You can see it here. Uruk, Zemdath, Nazar. Uruk and Zemdath Nazar. And then yes, this is in news actually. Some of you would have already read it. So who is this person whom you are seeing here? Any idea? I'm more interested not in knowing about his personal life or detail, but more interested in knowing who are his contemporaries and what are his contributions. Who are his contemporaries and what are his contributions? Yes, Banda Singh Bahadur, Any idea who his contemporaries are and what his contributions are? I don't think Bahadur Shah, is he associated with any Sikh guru? Is he associated with any Sikh guru? Is he associated with any Sikh guru? He's not. Okay. Associated with Khalsa army, yes. He's associated with Khalsa army. He's associated with Guru Gobind Singh. Guru Gobind Singh, yes. Farrukh Siyar is known to have captured him. Yeah. These are certain facts which we must remember about. Banda Singh Bahadur is a Sikh warrior and a commander of Khalsa army. Khalsa army means, you must be aware, it's Sikh religious army. Sikh religious army, the army which was founded with the purpose of protection of Sikh religion. Okay. At very young age, he became a Hindu ascetic, and he used to be called as Madhoddas Bhairagi. Then at some point of time, he comes in touch with Guru Gobind Singh, and he becomes his disciple. Later, Guru Gobind Singh gives him the new name Banda Singh Bahadur. So later on, Banda Singh Bahadur, he led the struggle against Mughal Empire, and in certain wars, he becomes successful. Like, he successfully captures the Mughal provincial capital, Samana. Then, yes, these are the contributions. He abolished the Jamindari system and granted property rights to the tillers of the land. But somehow he's captured by Mughals and tortured to death in the year 1715-16. Just try to remember this timelines, because sometimes we get confused. Maharana Ranjit Singh, what is the timeline of Maharana Ranjit Singh? What is the timeline of Banda Singh Bahadur? What is the timeline of Guru Gobind Singh? All these things we might have slightly, cluttered in our mind. So just be aware of his timeline. 1670 to 1760 is his timeline, and he is the disciple of Guru Gobind Singh. He is an important member of Khalsa army, and yes, he also led a struggle against the Mughal Empire, and helped in sacking this Mughal provincial capital of Samna. And he abolished the Jamindari system and granted property rights to the tillers of the land. So this much of details regarding this Banda Singh Bahadur would be sufficient. Banda Singh Bahadur would be sufficient. Let's quickly read about Kakatiya dynasty. So even before I start discussing about Kakatiya dynasty, I'll just give 1 to 2 minutes of time for you. Try to recollect and tell me what all you know about, say, cultural contributions of Kakatiya dynasty. Listen to my question carefully. Cultural contributions of Kakatiya dynasty, and of course, who are their political contemporaries, and the timeline of Kakatiya dynasty. Hope the question is clear. Question is very simple. As I'm just asking you, even before I discuss, we don't waste much time here. Just 1 or 2 minutes. Take time and try to tell me cultural contributions of Kakatiya dynasty. Toranas, 1,000-pillar temples. Okay. Be a little more specific in the terminologies, terms wise. Simple question. I'm not getting Warangal Fort. Okay. So that's what this is the mistake most of the students do when we ask for cultural contributions. What all you should talk about now? Say if the same question is asked in your mains, what are the cultural contributions you should talk about? Yes. Yeah, very good. You should talk about architecture, art, literature, literary stalwarts, isn't it? All these things you should talk about, or if there are any significant paintings, these are the things you should talk about, isn't it? Of course, construction of tanks is also an important thing. Yeah. So I think be prepared, ma. Kakatiya, I don't know they have asked a question on Kakatiya or not, but most of the big dynasties are now completed. Vijayanagara they have asked, Pallavas they have asked. So now there is a possibility that, you know, a question on Kakatiya dynasty is waiting for you, especially in your mains examination. But in prelims also, questions from Kakatiya dynasty can be asked. And the moment I say Kakatiya dynasty, tell me, who is the foreign traveler who visited Kakatiya dynasty? These are like very basics. All these things you should have been aware. Even before I ask, you must tell me, isn't it? Yeah, because that's an important source of Kakatiya history, right? Likewise. So Kakatiya dynasty, is Kakatiya dynasty contemporary of Rashtrakuta dynasty, or it comes after Rashtrakuta dynasty? Kakatiyas are before Rashtrakutas or after Rashtrakutas? Okay, what is Rashtrakutas timeline, ma? And are Kakatiyas contemporaries of Western Chalukyas, or they come later after Western Chalukyas? Western Chalukyas, also called as, yeah, they are after Rashtrakuta. After, and also, see, whenever we say after, it means, of course, Western Chalukyas, there is a slight overlap, very slight overlap. But how we have to answer is the predominance of Western Chalukyas in 10th and 11th centuries. Whereas Rashtrakutas 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, to some extent 10th. Whereas Kakatiyas 11th, 12th centuries, likewise. So we cannot say that they are contemporaries, because there is a decline of the importance or prominence of the Western Chalukyas, and there is a rise of the significance of the Kakatiyas, especially in India. Okay, yes, these are feudatories of Western Chalukyas, and with the decline of Western Chalukyas, they have rose to power. These basic details you must be aware. So Kakatiya dynasty, a South Indian dynasty that ruled most of the, look at this, Eastern Deccan region, comprising present-day Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, and parts of Eastern Karnataka and Southern Odisha. Let me pause it little here. Today, after the class, just prepare this timeline now. So, which dynasties? Say, start from Mauryas, and then you proceed likewise, at least till medieval. There should not be any confusion with you. Better not rely on any sources. You yourself do this work. Say, you can have it like this. If you want to make it, you can say Central India, North India, South India. Then you can have timeline, and then you can write names of different kingdoms. It will hardly take 20 to 25 minutes of your time, or maybe half an hour of your time, to make this kind of table. But once you make this table, believe me, you will have a strong grip over the chronology of the history. So having a strong grip over the chronology of the history, now it will help you in cracking many questions with ease. And definitely the questions on chronology, you would be in a position to attempt with more confidence and clarity. Okay, so that's about this Kakatiya dynasty. And yes, and they also ruled parts of eastern Karnataka and southern Odisha between 12th and 14th centuries. Their capital was Orugallu, now known as Warangal. Early Kakatiya rulers served as feudatories to Rashtrakutas and Western Chalukyas for more than 2 centuries. They assumed sovereignty under, remember the name, nowadays UPSC also is asking the question on the founders of the dynasties, or the river which is responsible for the resurgence, or river which is responsible for the emergence of particular dynasty, likewise, right? So Prataparudra I, remember the name, Prataparudra I in 1163, by suppressing other Chalukya subordinates in the Telangana region. But who is the popular among them? Ganapati Deva is the popular. Ganapati Deva, who ruled for around 63 years, he significantly expanded Kakatiya lands during the 1230s and brought under Kakatiya control Telugu-speaking lowland delta areas around the Godavari and Krishna River. So Kakatiyas also occupied those territories of Godavari and Krishna deltas. So after Ganapati Deva comes, popular female Rudramadevi, and she is one of the few queens in Indian history. There are not many queens in Indian history, right? So she has become even more popular. So Marco Polo, who visited India sometime around, made note of Rudramadevi's rule and nature in flattering terms. She successfully repelled the attacks of Yadavas of Devagiri into the Kakatiyan territory. This point, if you want to remember, or you can ignore, but other points are very, very important. So these are some of the facts associated with Kakatiya dynasty. Most of you must be already aware of these facts, but yes, you must be in a position to remember timely so that you can quickly replicate them in exam. So whom you are seeing here is Marco Polo. Marco Polo, traveler to Kakatiyan kingdom. I think in the previous document, I've made a list of all the travelers, all the important travelers. Please go through it. I tried to compile names of all the travelers, important travels who had made a visit. It will hardly take 15 to 20 minutes of time. And wherever there is a possibility, I have also included the images and names of those travelers. Revise that slide one, revise those slides one quickly. Then history of Kakatiyas. History of Kakatiyas. So source of history of Kakatiyas, we must be aware. One which is in news in the recent time because government is planning to revive Motupalli inscription. Where is this Motupalli? Any idea? Yeah, Motupalli actually is in Prakasham district. It's actually a, there used to be a port in the Motupalli. The Motupalli port, now they are planning to revive it into a fishing jetty. And Motupalli inscription, the name itself is suggestive. It's Abhayavartaka Shasanam. It's Abhayavartaka Shasanam means it's a kind of, insurance to traders. It's a kind of merchant insurance, especially those seafarers and those who are involved in the businesses, trade on high seas. For such people, this is like an insurance. It's like an insurance in case of any disaster. So it gives information about regarding the remissions to the foreign merchant. So it can be called as one of the world's first, attempt to give a kind of insurance to traders, especially who are involved in the foreign trade. So in that way, Motupalli inscription is very popular. And yes, Motupalli inscription is said to have been made by none other than Ganapati Deva. Then apart from that, another important is Hanumakonda 1000 Pillar Temple inscription. It is also issued by Rudradeva. And yes, Rudradeva declaring independence. So at least try to remember these two. One, Hanumakonda 1000 Pillar Temple inscription. Other, Motupallu inscription. Others just try to quickly go through the names. Kurunupudi inscription, Salakalavidu inscription, Tripurantakam inscription, Chandapatla inscription, Bayaram tank inscription, Draksharam temple inscription, Magallu inscription. Just try to get familiar with the names. I'm not asking you to mug up with the names, but at least these two you have to definitely remember. Motupalli inscription and Hanumakonda 1000 Pillar Temple inscription. Okay, yeah. Going a little further. So Kakatiya period books and their others. This I have expected answers from you. You guys should have tried to answer, because you should not just talk about architecture, you should also talk about the literary contributions of Kakatiyas. Panditaradhya Charitram is written by Palkuriki Somanada, very important book, is in Telugu language. It contains details of conditions, Shaivism and other religions during Kakatiya period. So be aware of the fact, Kakatiya are they are not Vaishnavite rulers. They promoted Shaivism. Of course, their goddess Kakati also is related to Shaivism. Then yes, Niti Saram is another popular book. Niti Saram is another popular book, and it's written by Baddena. It's in Telugu language. It explains statecraft. Statecraft, you have to remember that name. Shiva Yoga Saram, written by Paranu Ganapati Deva. It may not be that important. Kridabhiramam is very important. Kridabhiramam, written by Vinukonda Vallabhacharya. Actually, this book is a rich source of Kakatiya history. This book is a rich source of Kakatiya history. So you have to remember. Kridabhiramam. Then Prataparudriyam or Prataparudra Yashobhushanam, which was written by Vidyanatha in Sanskrit language. He's a court poet of Prataparudra too. This is very popular book one, Nrutya Ratnavali. And it is written by Jayapa Senani in Sanskrit. This is one of the books popular for its information on dance. So you have to remember this. Nrutya Ratnavali. Nrutya Ratnavali you have to remember. Then Andhra Mahabharatam. Yes. Some of them were translated into Telugu by Tikkana Somayaji. Tikkana belongs to this phase. So it's called as Andhra Mahabharatam. Tikkana Somayaji was Ganapati Deva's friend. Try to remember. He's a contemporary. And Manama Siddhi's court poet. Manama Siddhi was a king of Nellore. So Tikkana Somayaji, and of course, is contemporary of Ganapati Mahadeva. And yes, Palkuriki Somanada also belonged to Kakatiya period. Another very popular book, Nirvachanottara Ramayanam, is written by Tikkana Somayaji in Telugu language. So before Vijayanagara Empire, if there are any other kings who have contributed significantly to Telugu literature, it is none other than Kakatiya dynasty. Siddheshwara Charitra, written by Sarvappa. Yes, it has some information about Kakatiya period, but among all the names which you guys should not forget, is Pandita Rajya Charitram, Niti Saram, Kridabhiramam, Nrutya Ratnavali, Andhra Mahabharatam, Nirvachanottara Ramayana. Just after the class, take some 10-15 minutes time and try to quickly revise all these names once. You will easily remember. They're not at all difficult. Also try to remember the names of the others, not just books, especially the books like Nrutya Ratnavali written by Jayapa Senani. All these are important. So as the questions on Kalidasa, all these questions are already asked. If examiner wants to slightly test you and come to South India, he may definitely choose to pick from Kakatiya literary contributions. This is actually the image of Kakati, goddess Kakati, worshipped by Kakatiya dynasty. Then yes, I think somebody used this term Trikutalayas. What is that? Can you quickly explain? Who's? Yeah, Raghuvir. What is Trikutalayas? Trikutalayas, especially in the context of Kakatiya dynasty, Trikutalayas is an important architectural component. And of course, Toranas, as you guys have mentioned, also is an important aspect. Yeah, Trikutalayas, three shrines, and also one more aspect is the stellate pattern. The stellate pattern in which the temples are designed is also an important component of Trikutalayas. And yes, Kakatiya dynasty, popular for their Toranams, you can see it here. These are called as gateways. Is it a part of UNESCO heritage list? Did Kakatiya remains, Kakatiya era remains, did they get UNESCO tag? No. Recently, Government of India has applied and UNESCO heritage tag is awaited. This actually is the court scene, the visit of Marco Polo, where Rani Rudramadevi is seated here. Rani Rudramadevi is seated here. I'm just showing this image so that you will not forget the name of Marco Polo. And as some of you guys have already mentioned, they are known for active tank irrigation. Tank irrigation was popularized by Kakatiya dynasty, and some important lakes like Ramappa Lake, Paka Lake, and even Laknavaram Lake. All these are dug by either Kakatiya kings themselves or their feudatories. And what you are seeing here is the Ramappa temple, very popular Ramappa temple. Actually, both Ramappa temple and also the 1,000-pillar temple or Veyi Stambhala Gudi, both of them are called as Rudreshwara temple. Don't get confused. Both temples are called as Rudreshwara temples. Even Ramappa temple also is called as Rudreshwara temple. And yes, the 1,000-pillar temple, which is in Warangal city itself, is also called as Rudreshwara temple. It's their name of worshipping Lord Shiva. Rudreshwara is their way of worshipping Lord Shiva. And this particular slide I've taken from the UNESCO website itself. And yes, based on these important things, these three important things, Government of India has proposed for UNESCO World Heritage for especially the architecture of Kakatiya dynasty. So archaeological remains of Swayambhu temple and Kirti Toranas at Warangal Fort, Rudreshwara temple, locally known as Veyi Stambhala Gudi, 1,000-pillar temple at Hanambakonda, and Rudreshwara temple at Ramappa. So these are the important things which, of course, they are also applied. Have also applied them for UNESCO heritage. You can see it here. Kirti Toranas, Trikutalayas. Important architectural components of Kakatiya period. Trikutalayas, stellate-shaped temples, of course, along with presence of shrines of multiple gods. It's like pantheon of multiple gods. Okay, just read this once when I share with you. And yes, Kridabhiramam is a book, very popular book, which gives important information. And even UNESCO website talks about Marco Polo, and visit of Marco Polo to Kakatiya dynasty. Kakatiya dynasty, you can see it here actually, the stellate pattern. The stellate pattern you can see. Any other South Indian temples which have popularly stellate pattern? Yeah, very good. Yeah. Hoysalas, right? Yes. Then you can see it here. In the Ramappa temple, there are certain sculptures. These sculptures are a depiction of Perini dance. Perini dance. Perini Shivatandavam. This is also a state dance of Telangana. And yes, the dance posters written in Nritya Ratnavali by Janapasenani also appear in the sculptures of Ramappa. Okay, so the temple remained intact even after repeated wars, plunder, and destruction during wars. The major earthquake, because of this, temple got damaged. So this is some information about Ramappa. So some quick information about Perini Shivatandava, ancient dance form of Telangana, revived in recent times during Kakatiya dynasty. It has originated and prospered Okay, it's in martial dance form. Try to be aware of it. It's a martial dance form. Try to remember the name of this Padma Shri Nataraja Ramakrishna, who worked for a revival of Perani Shiva Tandavam. Here again, you can see 1,000 pillar temple. You can see 1,000 pillar temple, which is in a stellate pattern. So this much of information is sufficient about Kakatiya dynasty. Going a little further, one simple thing. Yeah. So what you're seeing here is Bagh print. It's in use. That's the reason I just want to mention it. So possible question in the exam. Possible question. Traditional Indian handicraft, and it's from which state? They can ask one. It has a GI tag also, Madhya Pradesh. So what it is actually, hand printed wood block relief prints with naturally sourced pigments and dye. You can see it here, right? This is the block. Okay. So bark print fabric motifs are typically geometric, paisley or floral composition dyed with vegetable colors of red and black over a white background. It is a popular textile printing product. So yes, it's popular in village park located on the banks of Bagh River. What is this? Anybody aware? It's not important. Just out of curiosity, I'm asking. What about that? Paisley. It used to be a very popular fashion trend at a point of time. Even now on fabrics, saris, especially saris of the women, this paisley, geometric design is very popular. I don't think it's Bhutta. Paisley means it's like it's something. It resembles, a what do you call it? Maybe a brinjal or something like that. I don't know how to call it. It's a very popular design, especially girls must be knowing it. So this is actually the Paisley design. It's very popular. I think here what they are doing also is, no, I think it's not Paisley. But yes, Paisley is very popular among most of the Indian sari traditions. Then yes, this is in news, right? Say toy industry of India, or the potential of toy making industry in India. Expect one mains question also this time on toy making because it was widely publicized. So yes, why not? So we should be aware of all the details. In my previous document, I have included details of many toy making traditions like Etikopaka, or including things like Chennapatnam toys, Marapachi dolls, Tanjavur Talariyatai dolls, all those things I mentioned. Here I try to include only those things which were not covered in the first document. So in those documents, I have included all those names. Try to go through it once. This is the word toy making tradition of India. So yes, there are also plans to establish a toy making cluster at Koppala in Karnataka. Koppala in Karnataka. There are plans to establish a toy making cluster. Let's try to see some names of popular toy making clusters in India. Ashari Kandi. It's like terracotta toys and pottery. Ashari Kandi is popular for terracotta toys plus pottery, especially this Ashari Kandi. It's a village. Entire village is involved in this toy making. It's very popular. So where is this place located? Ashari Kandi. Any idea? And these are Ashari Kandi toys. You can see it here. It's a very popular terracotta toys. also resembles somewhat that of Bankura toy making tradition of West Bengal. Yeah, Ashari Kandi, very good. It belongs to Assam. It belongs to Assam. Be aware of it. Huh? It's all about just remembering the names of the states where they come from, or if there is anything distinctive about the material they are using, or if there are any, say, like Kondapalli is famous, popular for its Ambari theme, or rural diorama theme. Likewise, there are certain themes, or what do you call it, Palaki ceremony theme. Likewise, in certain toys, certain themes are popular. You just have to remember those themes. Just like in Tanjavur doll, Gullu doll, especially the one, the dancing doll is popular, right? That bobble-headed dancing doll, and Shettiar theme. So just be aware of the themes and also be aware of the important material, if any, used in manufacturing, and the state to which this toy making traditions can be traced to. These are the only things examiner would like to know from you, especially in your prelims examination. Then what you are seeing here is actually live Fadibi. Live Fadibi. So live Fadibi. So yes, live Fadibi. Any idea where it belongs to? Okay, Manipur. Okay, any popular dance forms of Manipur? Any popular dance forms of Manipur? Okay, Manipuri. Then anything else? Sankirtana tradition. Good Sankirtana tradition. You remember in previous year's session also we discussed about Pungsholam, Ras Leela, and of course Sankirtana tradition. Of course, Tangta is a martial dance tradition, right? Martial dance tradition of Manipur. Try to recollect all those things. And yes, if you remember, what is this Sankirtana tradition or Manipuri tradition? Manipuri is a classical dance tradition. Sankirtana also is a classical dance tradition. What is the popular theme? Which is the popular religious theme associated, whether it is Sankirtana or whether it is Manipuri dance? Yes, very good. It is dominated by Vaishnavite theme, right? Sri Krishna theme or Vaishnavite theme is the dominant current. You should be aware of it. Just by looking at these images, you can say that this also is dominated by Krishna theme, Life Adipi. And who are the ethnic dominant people of Manipur region? What are they called as? Very good. They are called as Meiteis, right? They are called as Meitei people. Meiteis or Meitei people of Manipur. Meiteis or Meitei people of Manipur. They are fond of this Life Adibi doll making tradition. Life Adibi doll making tradition. Actually, it's very popular in Northeast India. Yeah. In which part of India Raman festival is celebrated, and why is Raman festival popular for? Just try to guess. Very good. Uttarakhand, right? Raman festival is popular in Uttarakhand. So what is the unique characteristic of Raman festival? Yeah, of course, it's an UNESCO intangible cultural heritage. Of course, very good. Raman festival is known for the colorful display of the masks. What is one more form of dance tradition of Eastern Indian states, especially of West Bengal, Jharkhand and Bihar, where also masks are very important aspect. Very good, very good. Chow dance. There are three variants of Chow dance, right? Can anybody quickly recollect and tell me what are the three variants of Chow dance? Yes. Purulia Chow, Mayurbhanj Chow, Seraikela Chow. Just try to quickly recollect those names. Even if any question comes up, you must be in a position to quickly yes, attempt those questions. Purulia Chow, Mayurbhanj Chow, and Seraikela Chow. And yes, what you are seeing here is the Koppal district, very popular for its Kinal toys. Somebody from Karnataka, they must be better aware of this Kinal toys. Predominantly, it's like religious theme. Kinal toys, predominantly religious theme, as you can see it here, predominated by religious theme. And material wise, it's made out of some traditional wood only, which is not worth mentioning, but yes, but predominated by religious theme. You can see it here, can see it here. So yes, I think last year for Republic Day parade tableau also, Karnataka government, I think it has chosen Kinal toys as the theme. The year before, it has chosen Bidri craftware of the Bidar town as one of the theme. But later year, it has chosen the Kinal toys of the Koppal district as the theme. Let's try to quickly go through some of the information. So Kinal has immensely rich artistic heritage. It was once a flourishing center for crafts, most well-known being exquisite carvings in wood, famous mural paintings in Pampapateshwara temple, and the intricate work on the wooden chariot at Hampi are said to be the work of Kinnal artisans. Okay, remember, mural paintings of Pampapateshwara also is important. I'm sure you guys must be aware what mural paintings are. Mural paintings are nothing but paintings made on walls. Mural paintings are paintings made on walls. And yes, artisans are called as Chitragara. Chitragara means maybe it can be Telugu equivalent of Chitrakara. So lightweight wood is used for toys. The base used, these are the different things used. Okay. So these are some of the details about Kinnal town, which is famous for toys and religious idols. And especially the toys also are dominated by religious themes. And then Tingda Dingla. Tingda Dingla. Where is this Tingda Dingla popular in? Any idea? Tingda Dingla popular in? Tingda Dingla is popular in actually Gujarat. You have to remember. It's a simple fact. And what makes it interesting is often this. They are made out of waste fabric called as tigdas. Waste fabric called as tigdas. Okay. So used usually made by women from traditional Kutchi families living in the interiors of Kutch. So that is about this Tigda Dingla. Tigda Dingla, wherein the raw material used is the waste cloth. The raw material used is the waste cloth. You can see it here. But yes, these days they are gaining popularity. These days they are gaining popularity. And this is another very popular toy making tradition. Toy making tradition. Just by looking at it, you can tell here also, isn't it? It's you can see here Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and you can see here Lord Sri Krishna. And another popular theme of this toy making tradition is owls. This actually is the wooden dolls of Nathungram. This actually is the wooden dolls of Nathungram. It's very popular in West Bengal. Okay, so important ones like Gaur Nithai, wooden owl, Krishna royal couple, but the wooden owl is most popular among them. You can see it here, right? wooden owl. The most popular thing. Let me write it for you so that you will not forget. Wooden owl is the popular theme here. Wooden owl is the popular theme of wooden dolls of Nathungram. Wooden dolls of Nathungram. So yes, you guys quickly tell me any other important toy making traditions which you know. I'll try to quickly write it here so it will be revision for everybody. Tell me the name of the toy making tradition and also tell me the state to which they belong and any other important information which you guys want to mention. So let's use this time for revision quickly. Yes. So okay, Kondapalli, Etikoppaka in Andhra Pradesh. Let me write it because there are also students from other states. So for them it will be helpful. For Telugu people it's easy. Kondapalli and Etikoppaka. I'll also write Marapachi. So yes, all these three. Andhra Pradesh. Yes, please. Others? Etikoppaka, Marapachi is done. Yeah. Tanjavur dolls. Okay, fine. That's it. Try to quickly recollect and tell me, ma. You would have read, right? Some sources, Nitin Singhania or whatever, other textbooks. Chennapatna in Karnataka. Okay, good. Chennapatna in Karnataka. Let me write down. Chennapatna in Karnataka. Udayagiri wooden cutlery from Andhra Pradesh. Though it's not toy making tradition, but Udayagiri wooden cutlery, you know, they also make a certain type of toys, kitchen toys, for playing. Any other ideas? Okay, Nirmal toys, good. Nirmal toys of Telangana region. Then anything else? Nirmal toys. So today, do this after the class. Just make a list of all other important toy making traditions in India. You should not ignore it because there is a possibility of a question in your mains. And also Yojana, that Yojana one monthly magazine has come dedicatedly on culture, right? In that also there are 2 articles on just the topic of toys. So that itself signifies that this topic can be important for our exam. Okay. I just given only a few names for you to generate interest in you, and only those names which are not so popular so that you will not forget them. Other popular names, and yes, just try to make a list of all, and if possible try to quickly download all those images at one place. So before exam, if you see it once, you will easily remember and it will be easy for you to revise those names. Okay. I think Jainism, if I start now, it will become a little hectic. I'll start it tomorrow. Yeah, I'm saying you have to be a little patient when I'm talking about the chapter on Jainism, because there will be some facts and there will be some, concepts and, those aspects. Be a little patient and try to carefully follow so that hereafter, any question on Jainism, we should not mark them incorrect. I deliberately try to make it a little bit deeper. Yeah, let's see this. So a app has been launched recently. The recent trend is gamification of learning. I'm sure you guys would have already heard this term, gamification of learning. Even National Education Policy talks about it. National Education Policy talks about it, and Prime Minister also in his Man Ki Baat speech says that education and especially the pedagogy has to be made more interesting by trying to teach through toys, and yes, not just trying to teach through toys, and we also have to leverage existing gaming industry. So to impart knowledge to children, in more interesting and interactive and dynamic manner. For that, gaming is one opportunity. Gaming is one such opportunity. The reason why I'm trying to emphasize on this aspect is it's not just to show you that simple idea of Little Guru, which is a dedicated app, and by playing games through the app, you can learn Sanskrit. By playing games to the app, you can learn Sanskrit. So the idea is important, ma. Say maybe if a question comes in your exam directly on Little Guru app, okay, we are happy, we can easily answer that. But more than that, the idea is powerful. That is gamification of learning, wherein we can try to adopt a similar principle of designing and devising games in such a way that the tougher concepts can be taught to the students in a simple and easier manner. And similarly, something closer to that, even Prime Minister in his Man Ki Baat has announced that we have to strive to realize the vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat through toy making industry. We must learn to innovatively adapt toys as a pedagogical means of expression of knowledge to student community. So this much of information should be sufficient regarding this, Little Guru, which is nothing but an, app. Look at this. These are all new trends, right? Bite-sized lessons, because students are not interested in lengthy sessions these days. They want bite-sized lessons, say 5 minutes, 7 minutes lectures, and get the feel of playing while learning. Then yes, so these are certain important things associated with this Little Guru app. Going a little further, you heard about this. One more thing which is in news. If you guys have read it, and in what context it is in news? It has come up in newspapers, ma. So that's the reason it has come back to discussion again. Yeah, not just not Akali movement, but actually the recent farmers agitation. During the recent farmers agitation, especially in parts of Punjab and Haryana. So this Pepsu Muzara movement has become because people try to recollect the memories. People try to recollect the memories of Pepsu Muzara movement, and they try to compare the present farm protest against farm bills to this Pepsu Muzara movement. So let's be aware of certain basics of this Pepsu Muzara movement. So any question on this topic, you will not find it inconvenient or uncomfortable. Okay, Pepsu tenant movement in Punjab. Try to remember its name. Pepsu tenant movement in Punjab, and actually this was again for land rights. This actually was for land rights. Try to remember the timeline and try to remember any other contemporary events associated with this Muzara movement. Okay. So the movement was started with the objective of taking ownership rights of land after tilling it for years together. So this movement started in 1930s under British rule when the Zagirdars were seeking the share in the crop of farmers across the villages of Punjab under the Patiala Riyasat. So the share used to be passed on to Maharaja of Patiala and then to Britishers. Thus the farmers were working like slaves of Jagirdars. Maharaja and British. So the farmers started this movement in which they refused to give the food grains to their masters. After India's independence, some 784 villages of Patiala Riyasat were named as Pepsu province. Following this, in the month of October 1948, Patiala Maharaja has passed orders to give one-third of land of villages to Jagirdars. However, farmers did not accept this. So later on, these farmers in 1949 confronted the security force of Maharaja, which four farmers, one cop, and one Patwari will kill. So this was happened. This is the event during Muzara movement. So just go through the background, okay, of the movement. So the outcome of the movement is important. So the outcome of the movement is PEPSU, Tenancy Act was formulated to protect the tenants. So that is about this PEPSU Muzara movement. Just go through it and quickly revise it once after I share the slide with you. So these are some details about PEPSU Muzara movement, which happened in PEPSU province, which can be equated to contemporary Punjab region. Contemporary Punjab region. Any idea what is this Prabuddha Bharata? Prabuddha Bharata. Anybody read about it? Prabuddha Bharata. Actually, Prabuddha Bharata is a, yes, very good. It's a magazine of Ramakrishna Math. Ramakrishna Math. Yes, it's published in English. I think Sahil, it is monthly, not weekly, but it's in monthly as far as I know. So it's a very popular monthly. Recently, like it is celebrating its centenary, I think, or 125 years they are celebrating. The importance of Prabuddha Bharata, you can see it. Prabuddha Bharata or Awakened India. It's an English language monthly journal of Ramakrishna Order. UPSC is interested in asking about magazines, all these things, right? So yes, that's the reason I want to discuss this. So it's an English language monthly journal of Ramakrishna Order. So it carries articles and translation by monks, scholars, and other writers on humanities and social sciences, and including religious, psychological, historical, and cultural themes. Of course, there are also book reviews. Okay. Is India's longest running English journal. India's longest running English journal. Another interesting facts about this is, yeah. Even Mahatma Gandhi used to read this. Carl Jung also has contributed to this. And Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan also used to read this. So that popular, this particular magazine, Prabuddha Bharata or the Awakened India is. Okay. So yes, that's the reason. There is a possibility of a question on this Prabuddha Bharata. So it's a journal which is published by Ramakrishna Order. It's a journal published by Ramakrishna Order. Going a little further, and this part, it's largely based on factual information. Let's try to quickly see it. Bhimbetka cave paintings. Bhimbetka cave paintings. Sittanavasal paintings. Ajanta caves. Ellora caves. Lenyatri cave paintings. Badami caves. Adamgarh Hills. Jogimara cave paintings. Saspol caves. Elephanta caves. In my first document, I covered about, Ajanta and Ellora also I covered. Elephanta caves also I covered. And I also covered about Badami. Now I want to cover the rest of them. Now Sittanavasal also I have made a mention, but here I'll try to revise it again. So let's use this opportunity to discuss this Bhimbetka cave paintings, Sittanavasal cave paintings, and Lenyadri cave paintings, Adamgarh Hills, Jogimara cave paintings, and Sasport caves. Okay. Yes. Generally, The questions on Ajanta, Ellora, Elephanta, Badami, these are already asked. So maybe now UPSC would want to test you. It may want you to read a little bit deeper and think beyond, and read beyond the regular popular ones which are seen in the news. Okay. Yes. Let's go through some factual information. First thing first, be aware of the fact that Bhimbetka rock shelters are UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Let me write it here so that you not forget. They are part of UNESCO World Heritage. So Bhimbetka rock shelters are an archaeological site in central India. Okay, observe carefully. Paleolithic and Mesolithic period, as well as the historic period. Actually, prehistory, you guys must be already aware. It's classified into lower Paleolithic, middle Paleolithic, and upper Paleolithic, and Mesolithic. I'll repeat this again: lower Paleolithic, middle Paleolithic, upper Paleolithic, and Mesolithic period. So what he is trying to suggest from this statement is that Bhimbetka rock shelters, it's an archaeological site. So it has remains of both Paleolithic period, especially upper Paleolithic period, and also Mesolithic period. So it exhibits the earliest traces of human life in India and evidences of Stone Age, starting at the sighting Acheulean times. If time permits, I'll try to discuss about lower Paleolithic period and explain what is this Acheulean time. And India is known for its Acheulean tool tradition. I'll talk about this Acheulean tool tradition later. Okay. Then it is in UNESCO World Heritage Site, Madhya Pradesh. So why we are studying about this? So this Bhimbetka rock shelters, they feature cave paintings of the prehistoric period. Observe carefully the timeline. They're around 10,000 years old, means roughly they belong to 8,000 BC. And 8,000 BC in India is actually the Mesolithic phase. I'll show that slide right now. Why and when in India Mesolithic has started. And these cave paintings, they show themes such as animals, early evidence of dance and hunting. And Bhimbetka site has the oldest known rock art in India, as well as one of the largest prehistoric complexes. So even if you get a separate 10 marker on Bhimbetka rock shelters, you must be qualified to write. This information is sufficient. So first things first, Bhimbetka is a rock shelter. Say rock shelter, which means see people then are till Neolithic phase. Be aware of this simple fact. Till Neolithic age, people do not have settlements. Human settlements first began to appear only during late Mesolithic, and widespread human settlements began only during Neolithic phase. Before Neolithic phase, human settlements are relatively rare. Then where human used to live, people used to live in rock shelters. People used to live in caves. These are the places where people used to or people prefer to live. So obviously, wherever they have lived, they would not have remained calm, isn't it? They have remained what? See, and this is also the time wherein, listen carefully, this is also the time, especially during upper Paleolithic or Mesolithic period, the tool traditions or the quality and the efficacy of the tools which are used by human beings have improved. As the quality of the tools have improved, and man can hunt better and man can hunt more. So man started to hunt better, man started to hunt more. As he's hunting more, which means he is having more food, means he is having to some extent surplus food. As he is having surplus food, now of course there is some amount of leisure. So this leisure man would have made use of in making some paintings. And that is the reason why paintings started to appear. Paintings started to appear, especially during Upper Paleolithic phase and Mesolithic phase. Paintings started to appear during Upper Paleolithic phase and more in Mesolithic phase. Some people say that, listen very carefully, some people say that in India, the paintings are dominant in Upper Paleolithic period, whereas in other parts of the world, paintings have dominated in the Mesolithic period. So some people are of the opinion that in India, painting tradition has become more popular during Upper Paleolithic. Whereas in other parts of the world, paintings, especially the cave paintings, what I'm trying to talk, has become more popular during Mesolithic phase. These basics we must be aware. We must be aware. And yes, some of the facts: 8000 BC, that is that Indian Mesolithic, that is the place, that is the time when cave paintings have become more abundant in Bhimbetka. In Bhimbetka. So that is some information about Bhimbetka, and this is actually rock painting of Bhimbetka. So what you are seeing actually here is Sita Navasal cave paintings. These are mural paintings. Sita Navasal cave paintings are related to which religious theme of Tamil Nadu? Related to which religious theme? Very good. They belong to Jainism, right? They belong to Jainism theme. You can see it here. These are actually Jain Tirthankaras. Actually, this is not a painting, this is a relief. Yes. Observe these timelines carefully. 2nd century Jain complex of caves in Tamil Nadu. Okay. Yes. It's a rock cut monastery created by Jains. What is it? Rock cut monastery. Okay. Who are Arihants? Yes, of course. In tomorrow's class, I will discuss in little more detail about them. Who are that Arihants? Acha. Bed-like structure with a pillow-like structure. Okay, structure. Okay, fine, good. Yes, please. Who are Arihants? Any idea? No, no, don't go by the name. Okay. Wait till tomorrow's class. We will discuss in detail about who these Arihants are. Yes. It's in Jaina tradition, Arihants are the people who have attained enlightenment. It's an important term. Should have been aware. Anyways. Now, so one more name, there is a possibility that you guys tend to forget, but also is important for certain reasons, is this Lenyadri caves. Lenyadri caves. The recent times, it's in news. That's the reason I have included the name of Lenyadri caves also. So don't go by the images of Ganesha here, though it is also presently called as, Ganesha cave, but in reality, it's not unlike Ellora, where you will have themes of Buddhist, Hinduism, and Jaina themes. Lenyadri Caves is a Buddhist rock cut cave. Only during recent times, some 250 years ago, some paintings were done by the then Peshwas in this rock cut cave. Otherwise, it's a Buddhist cave. It's a Buddhist, you can see here, right? Buddhist Chaitya. You can see it here. Chaitya. This is a Buddhist Chaitya. You guys must be knowing already what is a Buddhist Chaitya. Isn't it? So some information, try to remember this information. So Lenyadri Caves, this is also called as Ganesha Lena or Ganesha Pahad Caves. Okay. And remember these names also: Manmodi Caves, Shivneri Caves, and Tulja Caves. Let me write it right now so that you will not forget. Even if a quick question comes in your exam, you should not forget them. What are other caves in the proximity to Lenyadri Caves? Manmodi Caves, Shivneri Caves, and Tulja Caves. All these are located in the proximity. Remember, all these are in the state of Maharashtra, present-day Maharashtra. Okay, but here, no confusion. These are rock-cut Buddhist caves. And look at the time period, 1st to 3rd century AD, and they belong to Hinayana Buddhist tradition. They belong to Hinayana Buddhist tradition. Okay, yes. So caves 6 and 14 are Chaityagrahas, whereas rest of them are Viharas. Rest of them are Viharas. Okay, and actually, presently the cave number 7 was used as temple of Lord Ganesha. But in Lenyadri caves, just like popular paintings or popular mural paintings or frescoes or the reliefs or the bas relief structures or the sculptures, such a thing do not exist in Lenyadri caves. But yes, try to remember, these are also other popular rock-cut Buddhist caves in Maharashtra. And what you are seeing here is the cave paintings in Adamgarh Hills of Madhya Pradesh. Adamgarh Hills of Madhya Pradesh. I want you to remember the name. That's the reason I'm showing this slide for you. These are the topics. Generally, we take them for granted. But yes, they may bother us when they're asked as a question. So don't think it's waste of time. Adamgarh Hills near Hoshangabad town in Madhya Pradesh. So these are famous. Adamgarh Hills are famous for prehistoric rock shelters and rock paintings found in the hill. Stone Age artifacts, lower Paleolithic and Mesolithic implements have been excavated here. Right? So for the sake of quick revision, just see it here. So Paleolithic, prehistoric India, it's also called as Stone Age. Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, you can see it here. Paleolithic is Old Stone Age, 5 lakh to 10,000 BCE. Yes, for beginners, very, very important. Try to remember this. 5 lakh to 10,000 BC. Mesolithic, 10,000 to 6,000 BC. 10,000 to 6,000 BC. Neolithic age in India, 6000 to 1000 BC. 6000 to 1000 BC. And see it here, very interesting, not uniform throughout the subcontinent. Means, see this Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, which we have studied here, timelines may not be relevant throughout India. Maybe there are certain parts like in South India, where Neolithic started much later than the northern India. Likewise, but these are generally agreed timelines. Yes, there are also certain parts of the country in which the respective, respective periods might have started much later than they have been in other parts of the country, right? So yes, this division is based on geological age, technology of stone tools, and the subsistence patterns of the people. Technology of stone tools means, say, what type of technology? Like there are certain things like blade tools, flake tools, all these things we generally study in anthropology. But yes, NCERT also makes a mention of it. I don't know how many of you have actually read it and noticed it. So anybody read that chapter, which I know most of the students ignore this topic. So which is the characteristic tool of lower Paleolithic, which is the characteristic tool of middle Paleolithic, which is the characteristic tool of upper Paleolithic, which is the characteristic tool of Mesolithic? Can anybody tell me quickly? I'm not talking anything beyond NCERTs. Everything here is within confines of NCERTs. So characteristic tool of Mesolithic, very good. Very good. Characteristic tool of Mesolithic is microliths. Okay. And what is the characteristic tool of upper Paleolithic? Characteristic tool of upper Paleolithic. Characteristic tool of upper Paleolithic is blade tools. Blade tools. And then characteristic of middle Paleolithic. Middle Paleolithic. Flakes, right? Flake tools. Flake tools are the characteristic period of middle Paleolithic. Then lower Paleolithic, you have this hand axes, cleavers, hand axes and cleavers. And even before that hand axes and cleavers, you have pebble tools. And then so they're even before this hand axes cleaver tradition. I'm not going into that depth of talking Acheulean, Abelian tradition. It becomes slightly technical. But for general study student, this much of information is important. You should be aware. Characteristic tool tradition of Mesolithics is microliths. Characteristic tool tradition of lower Paleolithic is hand axes, cleavers tool tradition. And for middle Paleolithic, it is flake tool industry. And for upper Paleolithic, it is blade tool industry. Just go back to your NCERT and quickly revise it once again. I'm sure most of you will read this chapter, but you will never bother to revise it again, nor you would have read it with interest. But these are also important. Don't think they are not important. They are also important for your exam. Just go back to your NCERT once again and read that chapter once, so that you will easily understand. I think, yeah. So this again is the timeline within India. And yes, read about Zogimara paintings. This is what you're seeing here is Zogimara painting. So Zogimara, it's a place which is located in Chhattisgarh. Just read about this and I share the slide with you. I'll stop the class for today. I'll start it again tomorrow. I did not give break, so let me stop it now. Tomorrow we will try to discuss a little bit more detail and depth. I'll share the this thing with you right now. Read it once, and if time permits, also read those details I have included on Jainism once before you come to class. I try to filter it by going through the source from which I've taken. Predominantly, I've taken from Wikipedia itself, nowhere else. And that also I try to filter it selectively, and wherever possible, I also try to include images. Even if you don't understand, read it once, so that tomorrow you will feel a little more familiarized in the session. Just spend 1 hour time. Don't spend too much time also. just quickly read it, try to understand as much as you can. Even if you don't understand something, don't worry. I'll try to clarify to the extent possible in the class. And let's use the class to properly revise this topic of Jainism in tomorrow's session. So I'll stop my class for today. Thank you.